So, little update, March 25th. What am I thinking today? So, first thing, the numbers today continue to increase. The number of fatalities today is documented at just about 930. Total number of confirmed cases, about 65,000. So, that's a case fatality rate, which is the number of people dead divided by the number of confirmed cases of 1.42%. And that's a pretty big number, right? Most people have in their mind this idea that influenza has a case fatality rate of 0.1%. So one person out of every 1,000 who gets influenza dies. And this, of course, is saying 14 people out of every 1,000 who get this die. So that's a pretty big difference. There's a lot of debate about what the true case fatality rate is. And in the case of the coronavirus that we're dealing with, you can only know that when you really know what the denominator is, when you really know the number of people that have the disease. And my fear is that, frankly, that number is everything, and we're not working hard enough to understand it. Now, about a week ago, I posted a total rant about why I was incredibly frustrated that the emergency use authorization had only been given to a company at the time called Roche that is a great company that could make a diagnostic kit all day long, but the problem is they hadn't started making it in early January when the sequence of RNA that identifies this virus was laid out. In other words, they were behind the eight ball, and certainly people I spoke with that had it on exceptional authority said there was not a chance in hell they were going to be able to roll out tests at the clip that it was being promised. And of course, that turned out to be true. Believe it or not, tomorrow will be 2 weeks from the day that we were promised 1 million kits. And I'm not saying that to sound like Dr. Evil, right? Literally 1 million kits were promised a week ago yesterday, and we haven't done 100,000 tests. Well, no, that's not true. We've probably done just over 100,000 tests. So we're way off the pace on this. And again, why does this trouble me? Well, it troubles me because I don't think we can make the decisions about how aggressive we want to be in terms of quarantine if we don't actually know the case fatality rate. It matters how lethal this disease is. Now, play the thought experiment with me. Imagine, for example, that there aren't 65,000 people in the United States that are infected with this coronavirus, but there are 650,000 people that are infected with coronavirus. Well, if that's the case, then the case fatality rate goes from 1.42% to 0.142%. That's in line with influenza. What if there are 6.5 million people infected with this thing? You know what? Then this thing becomes less lethal than influenza. If that were true, it means we're way overreacting in what we're doing. So I think my fear is this. I'm worried that there is a political agenda. And if you've followed me for any length of time, you probably know there are a few people who care less and think less and talk less about politics than me. I don't have a political bone in my body, but I can't help but look at this as being somewhat politically motivated. And that's based on a number of factors, including behind-the-scenes discussions I've had with people who have had firsthand discussions directly with people in the White House, and they're getting the runaround on the answer to this question. Why has there not been an emergency use authorization granted to the lab in China that can provide this test for $30 a head, roll it out in 10 days, we could have had 1 million tests done. Why was that not done? No one is giving a straight answer to that question. That to me is frustrating. Secondly, I think whether consciously or subconsciously, there's a view that says we don't actually want to know how many people are positive. The less we test people, the less people come up positive, the more likely we are to just convince everybody that this isn't an issue and you can get back to work. And look, I get it. I mean, I think the economic consequences of what's going on right now are troubling. But I think that's a very short-sighted approach. Why? You cannot hide death. You cannot hide time in the ICU. You cannot hide hospitalizations. So imagine for a moment that we weren't testing anybody and we had no way of knowing what was going on, and we only thought there were 6,500 cases of coronavirus. We'd still have 928 deaths. We would extrapolate that to be a case fatality rate of 14%. So just by changing the denominator, this is a 14% mortality, which would be devastating if it could spread as much as we know this can spread, down to, this is influenza or potentially less. And frankly, there are some really smart people out there arguing this could be less deadly than influenza if it truly has the reach that it could, and we just don't know it because we're not measuring it. So what's my point? My point is, I would hope that we could put politics aside. I would hope that we would let the science and the epidemiology do all of the talking right now. And if I could wave a magic wand, I would figure out a way to have everybody tested. And to me, the first way to do that is grant the emergency use authorization to Chinese labs who can already do this in spades and get people tested. And what we're doing right now is the opposite. I think we are slowing down. And when our team looked at the numbers today, we actually see a slowdown in day-on-day testing. Now, again, maybe that's noise, and maybe in 3 days we'll say that was just a blip. No one's slowing down testing. Great. But if anybody's listening to this and you have any influence over testing capacity in the United States, especially in high-risk areas, I would hope that we are doing everything we can to do this, because knowing the denominator matters. If you know the denominator, you know the severity of this thing. It's not about the shock value of that number. It's about understanding the true case fatality rate, the true rate of hospitalization. I still believe New York is going to be completely overrun. It's too soon to tell which other cities are going to be as well, if any, but we have to understand what type of a virus we're up against if we want to know how much drastic measure we have to put in place with respect to the challenges that are being imposed on pretty much everybody at this point. And as has been pointed out by people much smarter than me, the economic, social, emotional cost of those measures is enormous. So I'd like to know that we're doing it with sound logic and data backing it up.